Hello everyone, Mr. Linder here. Let's talk about carbon dioxide removal from the body using the mechanism called the chloride shift. So carbon dioxide is produced during cellular respiration. So when we metabolize, we produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct, and we need to remove that carbon dioxide from the body. So it turns out that when carbon dioxide is released from cells, 7% of the carbon dioxide dissolves directly into the blood plasma. But we produce too much carbon dioxide for the blood plasma to accommodate all of that CO2. So we also attach carbon dioxide to hemoglobin inside of red blood cells. And so that's another 23% of the carbon dioxide that's transported. And then we also convert carbon dioxide into bicarbonate. And so that's another 70% of the carbon dioxide transport. It's important to get rid of carbon dioxide because when there's an increase in CO2, known as hypercapnia, that can lead to acidosis. And if we were to go into acidosis, that can lead to denaturization of proteins, and it can also affect the central nervous system, even leading to coma or death. So it's important for us to eliminate carbon dioxide from our blood, take it to the respiratory system, and then exhale that carbon dioxide from the body. So we need to convert the CO2 into molecules that we can then transport to the respiratory system and then get rid of it. So turning carbon dioxide into bicarbonate is actually a temporary molecule that we can use as a buffer. And so bicarbonate in the cardiovascular system can temporarily buffer other metabolic acids and help us to further stabilize blood pH and keep our body in homeostatic balance. So how do we accomplish moving carbon dioxide through the circulatory system and then getting it to the respiratory system? So the first thing we want to look at is the chloride shift at the tissues. So chloride shift at the tissues. And this is a mechanism for essentially converting carbon dioxide into bicarbonate so it's easier to transport it to the respiratory system. So the scenario is like this. So we have cells and we utilize metabolism to produce ATP. But in the process of producing ATP, we produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And so that carbon dioxide needs to go into the circulatory system and then eventually leave the body through the respiratory system. So if we have systemic capillaries, then what we're looking at is the CO2 leaving the tissues. So this is body tissues. And we know that 7% of it is dissolved in the blood plasma. So 7% of the CO2 is in the blood plasma. But then we also have the red blood cells. And we know that 23% of it is attached to hemoglobin. So we have HbCO2. That represents 23% of the CO2. But most of the carbon dioxide is being turned into bicarbonate. So we have CO2 mixing in water within the red blood cell. That's enzymatically catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase to form carbonic acid. And then the carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate. And we know that 70% of the CO2 that we are eliminating from the body is temporarily in the form of bicarbonate. Once we form bicarbonate in the red blood cell, so this is a red blood cell, once we form bicarbonate in the red blood cell, the bicarbonate is going to be transported out into the plasma. So bicarbonate leaves the red blood cell, goes into the blood plasma in exchange for chlorine. So the chloride ion enters from the plasma into the red blood cell, to balance out the charge. So bicarbonate leaves, negative charge, chlorine comes in, negative charge, and we maintain electrical balance. And so this is the chloride shift that takes place at the tissues in order to put bicarbonate in the blood plasma. One other thing to make note of is that when the CO2 is mixing with water and forming carbonic acid and forming hydrogen ions and bicarbonate, the hydrogen ions within the red blood cells is lowering the pH. So there's a decrease in pH within the red blood cells. This acidosis that occurs within the red blood cells is going to assist hemoglobin that's carrying oxygen to release that oxygen out to the tissues. And so this is enhancing unloading of oxygen out to the tissues so that oxygen can be used in aerobic metabolism. And in the process of aerobic metabolism, you are producing carbon dioxide as a byproduct, and then the CO2 can go through this process of CO2 transport. So what we've done is we've created bicarbonate in the blood plasma, and now that bicarbonate, as it circulates temporarily in the blood, can be used as a buffer for other metabolic acids. The next mechanism we want to look at is chloride shift at the lungs. So chloride shift at the lungs. So what's going on in this scenario? So now we have capillaries in the respiratory system, and then we can draw in some squamous epithelial cells, and so this will be the alveoli. And so as bicarbonate makes its way into these capillaries in the respiratory system, we can look at the chloride shift that takes place in the red blood cells in order to turn the bicarbonate back into carbon dioxide. So we have our transporters again. This time, bicarbonate comes into the red blood cell in exchange for chlorine going out. So there's our chloride shift. And now we can do the reverse reaction where bicarbonate combines with hydrogen ions to form carbonic acid. Enzymatically catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase to form water and carbon dioxide. So now we've turned the bicarbonate back into CO2. That is 70% of the CO2 transport. So this carbon dioxide then is going to diffuse into the alveoli so that we can get rid of carbon dioxide using the respiratory system. We still have carbon dioxide attached to hemoglobin. And so that carbon dioxide, that's 23%. That carbon dioxide can detach. And so it too can enter the alveoli and be released. And then we have 7% of CO2 just directly dissolved in the plasma. And so that too can enter the alveoli, and we can get rid of the carbon dioxide that's in the plasma as well. Because hydrogen ions are combining with bicarbonate, we're going to see an increase in pH within the red blood cell. So the red blood cell is going to become more alkaline, and this actually is going to increase the affinity of hemoglobin to bind oxygen. So what we're going to see is the oxygen that leaves the alveoli is going to come into the red blood cell, and that oxygen now is going to combine with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin so that we can transport that oxygen out to our cells and tissues and organs so that they can then perform aerobic metabolism. So the chloride shift at the lungs is essentially chlorine leaving the red blood cell so that bicarbonate can come back in, so we can turn the bicarbonate back into carbon dioxide and then eliminate the CO2 from our respiratory system. So carbon dioxide out, oxygen into the red blood cells, combining with hemoglobin because we changed the affinity due to the pH change in the red blood cell, and now we can transport oxygen as well. So that is carbon dioxide removal from the body and the chloride shifts. I hope that helps. Take care.